The city had a way of swallowing sound. At night, even the rain seemed quieter, dissolving into the gutters with a muted hiss. The streets glistened under the glow of tired street lamps, their light fractured into puddles that mirrored a sky too heavy to care. It was the kind of evening people hurried through, heads down, coats pulled tight, eyes fixed on the promise of warmth waiting at home. But not everyone had a home. At the edge of an alley, hidden between dumpsters that smelled of rot and rust, sat a cardboard box. To most, it was invisible, just another piece of trash waiting to be hauled away, sagging under the weight of the storm that had passed only hours ago. The rain had seeped into its fibers, softening the corners until they curled and collapsed inward. The kind of box no one would notice, the kind of box no one should have to call shelter. She almost missed it. Her shoes splashed against the uneven pavement as she quickened her pace, her umbrella trembling in the wind. The city had worn her down that day. Work had stretched late, her body ached, her patience thinner than paper. She wasn't looking for anything except the comfort of her bed, but then it came, so faint she thought she'd imagined it. A cry. Not the sharp wail of a cat, not the distant squall of a baby. Something smaller, fragile, a sound half swallowed by the night. She froze. Her first instinct was to keep walking. Surely she'd misheard. People didn't stop in alleys. People didn't go looking for trouble. But then it came again, barely there, like a breath carried on the wind. She turned. The alley yawned before her, long and slick with shadows. The smell was sharp, wet garbage, rusted metal, the sour tang of old beer bottles smashed against brick. And there, just past the dumpsters, was the box. She didn't know why she was drawn to it. Maybe it was the way it sagged, or the way silence seemed to pool around it. Maybe it was the sound, another faint cry, this time weaker, fading. Her chest tightened. Her shoes squelched as she stepped closer. The cold gnawed through her coat, biting at her skin, but she barely noticed. Every step felt heavier, her breath loud in her ears. She crouched down, the concrete soaking through her knees, and reached out with trembling hands. The box smelled of mildew and despair. For a heartbeat she hesitated. Part of her prayed it was empty, that she was wrong, that nothing living could be inside something so broken. But then the box moved. Barely. A twitch, a stir. She pulled back the flap with careful fingers, and her breath caught. Inside was a bundle of fur, matted and soaked, curled into itself as if trying to disappear. A puppy, a German shepherd, though so small, so thin, it hardly looked real. Its ribs rose like ridges under skin stretched too tight, each breath a shallow struggle. Its eyes, half shut, glazed with exhaustion, flicked open just enough to meet hers. Her throat closed. He wasn't just weak. He was dying. "Oh my God," she whispered, her voice breaking against the night. The puppy didn't move. For a terrifying moment she thought she was too late, that the shallow breaths were her imagination. But then a faint shiver ran through his body, a fragile tremor that made her heart lurch. Hey, no, stay with me," she whispered, her hands fumbling to scoop him up. His body was cold, colder than she'd ever felt on something alive. His fur was soaked through, clinging to his skin, his bones sharp against her palms. He didn't resist. He didn't have the strength to. His head lolled against her arm, his breath rattling like something broken inside his chest. She pulled off her coat in one desperate motion, wrapping him in it, clutching him close to her chest. He was barely a weight in her arms, lighter than he should have been, as if hunger had carved him hollow. She could feel the dampness of his fur bleeding into her clothes, but she didn't care. Her heart was racing now, pounding against her ribs. She stood, her legs unsteady, her umbrella forgotten in the gutter. The street looked different suddenly, wider, emptier, every second a threat. She hurried to her car, fumbling for her keys with shaking hands. Each breath the puppy took sounded weaker than the last, like time was slipping through her fingers. "Hold on, little one," she begged under her breath, her voice cracking. "Just hold on." The car door slammed shut, the heater roaring to life as she laid him gently across her lap. His tiny chest rose and fell, so faint she had to hold her breath to see it. Panic pressed in on her. The vet's office. Was it even open this late? Could she get there in time? Her hands shook on the steering wheel as she pulled onto the road, her eyes flicking between the empty streets and the bundle in her coat. Rainwater streaked across the windshield, catching the glow of streetlights, smearing the world into lines of gold and gray. The city felt endless, each red light a cruel test of her patience, every passing second another chance for him to slip away. She kept glancing down, terrified she'd look and find him still. Her thoughts spiraled. Who could leave him like that? How long had he been in that box? Had anyone else walked past and heard him? Did they just keep walking? Rage tangled with grief in her chest, but she shoved it aside. Anger wouldn't keep him alive. Only time, only care, only a miracle could do that now. She reached a stretch of road where the silence was overwhelming. No cars, no people, just the sound of her own shaky breathing. The puppy shifted faintly, a weak twitch, and she nearly sobbed with relief. "That's it," she whispered, eyes stinging. "Stay with me, just a little longer." The glowing sign of the emergency vet clinic appeared in the distance like a lighthouse in the dark. Her tires squealed as she pulled into the lot, her door flung open before the engine even stopped. She clutched him to her chest as she ran, the glass doors sliding open with a whoosh, the sterile smell of disinfectant washing over her. A nurse looked up startled as she cried out, "Please, he's not breathing right. He's freezing. I think he's dying." Hands reached for him, lifting him away from her arms, placing him on a table surrounded by machines and wires. The world became a blur of motion, gloves snapping on, voices calling out terms she didn't understand. Blankets draped, heat lamps flicked on. The puppy lay motionless, wires clipping to his tiny body, the steady beep of a monitor, the only sound tethering her to hope. She stood frozen in the corner, her hands clenched together, her chest rising and falling in panicked waves. Every beep, every whispered word from the staff felt like it carried the weight of life or death. She couldn't breathe. A vet approached, his expression careful but grim. "He's critical. Severely hypothermic, severely malnourished. Honestly," he paused, glancing back at the tiny figure under the heat lamps, "he might not make it through the night." Her stomach dropped, her knees nearly giving out, but she shook her head, fierce even through the tears. "No, he will. Please, just do everything you can. I'll stay. I'll do anything. Just don't give up on him." The vet studied her for a moment, then nodded, before returning to the whirlwind of care. She inched closer to the table, her hand hovering before she finally laid her fingers gently against the puppy's paw. It was icy cold. She bent down, whispering so softly the staff couldn't hear. "Please, little one, don't leave me now. Hold on." And as the machines hummed, as the rain outside faded into silence, she waited, caught between despair and hope, clutching to the fragile rhythm of a heartbeat that could stop at any moment. The room was too bright. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, white and sharp, stabbing into her tired eyes. The hum of machines filled the silence with a mechanical heartbeat, steady but fragile, like a thread stretched too thin. The woman stood rooted to the corner, her coat soaked through, her shoes still damp from the storm. She could not look away from the table where the tiny German shepherd lay. The staff worked quickly, with a kind of quiet urgency that carried both routine and desperation. A nurse placed warm IV fluids into the puppy's tiny vein, her hand steady despite the trembling rise and fall of his chest. Another gently dried his fur with towels, trying to wick away the chill that clung to him. A heat lamp glowed overhead, casting a soft amber halo on his still body, as though light alone could coax him back from the edge. The vet checked the monitor, then pressed his stethoscope to the puppy's chest. His brows furrowed, his lips set in a line too heavy for words. He looked up at her, his voice calm but laced with gravity. His body temperature is dangerously low. He's severely dehydrated and there's almost no fat left on him. His heart, he trailed off, shaking his head slightly. It's weak. We're fighting against the clock here. Her throat tightened, her hands clutching the fabric of her damp coat. She could not look away from the table where the tiny German shepherd lay. The staff worked quickly, with a kind of quiet urgency that carried both routine and desperation. A nurse placed warm IV fluids into the puppy's tiny vein, her hands steady, despite the trembling rise and fall of his chest. Another gently dried his fur with towels, trying to wick away the chill that clung to him. A heat lamp glowed overhead, casting a soft amber halo on his still body, as though light alone could coax him back from the edge. The vet checked the monitor, then pressed his stethoscope to the puppy's chest. His brows furrowed, his lips set in a line too heavy for words. He looked up at her, his voice calm but laced with gravity. His heart is weak. We're fighting against the clock here. Her throat tightened, her hands clutching the fabric of her damp coat. She wanted to ask the questions clawing inside her chest. Will he live? Will he make it? How much time does he have? But the words stuck. She already knew what the vet wasn't saying, that death was close, closer than life. She forced herself to take a step closer to the table, to see him not as a fading patient, but as a soul still fighting. His tiny paw was wrapped in gauze where the IV line threaded in. His eyes were closed now, lashes damp, chest rising only when the oxygen mask pressed fresh air against his face. He looked so small, so impossibly fragile, like a child's forgotten toy. But beneath the wires and tubes there was still a spark. She swore she could see it, the faint twitch of his ear, the barely there quiver of his whiskers. Signs that he hadn't given up. "Can I stay?" she asked, her voice breaking. The vet's eyes softened. "Yes, but prepare yourself. If his heart stops, we'll do everything we can. Still, sometimes everything isn't enough." She nodded, biting back the sob that rose in her chest. She moved to his side, pulling a chair closer, her knees nearly buckling as she sat. She reached out with trembling fingers, brushing gently against his paw. His skin was icy even under the lamp, but she kept her touch steady, whispering softly so only he could hear. "You are not alone, little one. I promise you that. Just fight a little longer, please." Minutes turned into hours. The clock on the wall ticked, each second a sharp reminder of how close he was to slipping away. The vet and nurses came and went, checking vitals, adjusting fluids, murmuring updates in clipped, clinical tones. But to her, the world had narrowed into one fragile rhythm, the faint beep of the monitor, the rise and fall of his chest. Every so often, the monitor would dip, the sound slowing until her heart seized in panic. Once the line faltered long enough for a nurse to rush forward, hands pressing against the tiny body, murmuring instructions to the vet. She thought she would lose him right there, that the silence would swallow the last fragile note of life. But then, a weak cough, a shallow breath, the monitor's rhythm stuttering back into place. Her eyes blurred as relief crashed through her, leaving her trembling. Each scare chipped away at her hope, but each fragile return stitched it back together. In the quiet between crises, her mind wandered dangerously. She thought of the box in the alley, soaked through and collapsing. How long had he been in there? Hours? Days? How many people had passed without stopping? The thought burned in her chest like acid. But alongside the anger was something else, an unbearable sorrow. That in his short life, this tiny creature had already known abandonment,
suffering, and cold. The vet returned after what felt like an eternity, his expression unreadable as he checked the charts. She held her breath, her fingers gripping the edge of the chair. Finally, he spoke. "He's stable, for now, but he's not out of danger. The next few hours will decide everything. His body is fragile. Hypothermia like this can shut down organs, and he's so malnourished, even if we stabilize him, the fight has only just begun." His words should have crushed her, but instead she felt a flicker of fire in her chest. Stable. It wasn't victory, but it wasn't defeat either. It was a doorway, however narrow, and she wasn't going to let him walk through it alone. She leaned closer to the tiny bundle, her voice soft, trembling but certain. "You hear that? You're still here. You made it this far. Don't give up now." The puppy shifted faintly under the blanket, so slight she almost missed it. His ear twitched, his paw flexed weakly against the gauze. Her breath caught. It wasn't much. It could have been reflex, nothing more. But to her, it was enough. A sign. The hours bled together. She stayed by his side, whispering stories into the sterile air, about the life he could have, about green fields and warm beds, about mornings filled with sunlight instead of cold rain. Her voice was steady, even when her body shook with exhaustion, her words carrying the weight of a promise she had no intention of breaking. At one point, a nurse came to her, offering coffee, urging her to rest. She refused. How could she sleep when he was fighting to breathe? She traced small circles on his paw instead, grounding herself in the fragile rhythm of his life. The night grew deeper, the silence heavier. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving the world hushed under a blanket of wet pavement and distant sirens. Inside, the clinic was still, the hum of machines, the only testament to life persisting. Then it happened again. The monitor faltered, the beep slowing, the line flattening into a dangerous lull. Her heart lurched, her hands flying to his paw as the vet rushed forward, barking orders. "Epinephrine, now! Keep the fluids going!" She froze, her breath caught in her throat as the nurse injected the tiny syringe, the vet's hands pressing against the puppy's chest. The room filled with tension, every second stretching unbearably. Her mind screamed, "Not now! Not when he's fought this far! Not like this!" For a moment, the monitor was silent. The world stopped. Then, a beep. Weak. Faltering, but real. Another followed, stronger this time, then another, until the rhythm returned, fragile but steady. The room exhaled at once, the staff easing back, relief palpable. She broke into tears as her body racked with sobs as she pressed her forehead against the edge of the table. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice cracking, unsure if she was speaking to the vet, to fate, or to the tiny fighter himself. The vet placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice quiet but firm. "He's stronger than he looks, but tonight isn't over. Stay with him. He needs every ounce of will to keep fighting." She lifted her head, wiping her tears, her eyes red but fierce. "I'll stay, as long as it takes." The puppy shifted again, his breath rattling under the mask, but steady enough to count. She brushed her fingers against his fur, whispering through the tears. "You're not alone anymore, I promise you that. Just hold on a little longer. Tomorrow will come, and when it does, you'll never be forgotten again." The hours ticked on, fragile and heavy, each breath, each heartbeat a battle. She stayed through it all, her heart tethered to the fragile spark of life before her. And as dawn hinted at the edge of the horizon, one truth burned through her exhaustion like a promise carved in stone. The fight wasn't over, but neither was hope.